What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks video. I am your host, Justin Bales, joined by Spike once again. He is now becoming more regular on the Tuesday night into Wednesday. This is a podcast for Wednesday, December 8th. We recorded the night before, which is why I said Tuesday night. We will probably do this 100 times throughout this podcast. But Spike, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking.
If anyone is unaware, Spike is one of our newest coaches. If you just go to essentially our screenshots thing in Discord, or if you check out the Karma Wins Twitter, you can even go to the main Twitter. I know it got tweeted out a couple of days ago. He has been the hottest coach, absolutely dominating. I should say one of the hottest coaches. Matty Ice is also just destroying football, but Spike does NFL. He does NBA as well. So one of the best coaches that we have at the moment. He is absolutely on fire, just destroying NBA. If you guys don't know what you get with our core plays, you get all of our core plays, essentially just guys that we're looking to put in our lineups. You also get into our premium Discord chat. We have a free one as well, chatdfs.com, but the core plays package will get you into our premium one. You get all of our projections in the projections portal. That's karma value, their projections for that specific night, ownership, all that good stuff. A lot of extra stats that Sam has done a great job on. You also get our premium content, which is Final Thoughts. We have the Core Plays article that has been put out as well. So you get all of that for a low price on our Core Plays package, which can be found at dfskarma.com/pricing. And the core plays that you get are from a few different coaches, FanDuel and DraftKings. So you can also get everything all encompassed, all sports. That's along with props and everything with our MVP package. But we need to get on to tonight's slate, and you guys are going to be listening to me ramble quite a bit because there are 13 games and just a ridiculous amount of injury news. Before we jump into that, if you enjoy this podcast, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. On top of that, go ahead and comment anything that you have below, any questions or anything. Spike and I will be in here throughout the day to answer them. Obviously, with 13 games, we are not going to list every single player that we think is viable on this slate. There's too many of them. So if we didn't mention someone, you're wondering about them, or you just really like them, drop their name below. We'll kind of let you know how we feel about them. Moving to the injury news. Bear with me. There is a ridiculous amount that I have to go over. In the first game, Justin Holiday is out for the Indiana Pacers. Nerlens Noel started for Mitchell Robinson last night. Robinson then obviously came off the bench. So far, he has done extremely well in that game, but it's something to note. Davis Bertans questionable for the Washington Wizards. Spencer Dinwiddie has already been ruled in. On the other side, Hamidou Diallo has been listed as questionable. The Philly-Charlotte game, the big one for Philadelphia is Tyrese Maxey is questionable. On the other side for Charlotte, Mason Plumlee, Ish Smith, Jalen McDaniels, Terry Rozier, and LaMelo Ball will continue to miss time. DeMar DeRozan, Kobe White, and Javonte Green all ruled out for Chicago. Alex Caruso doubtful for this game. Dean Wade questionable for Cleveland on the other side. Obviously, for Toronto, you still have OG Anunoby and Khem Birch missing time. George Hill is the only questionable guy for Milwaukee. Dante DiVincenzo is close to a comeback. Semi Ojeleye will also miss some time as well. Then on the other side, Caleb Martin is questionable. Markieff Morris and Jimmy Butler have already been ruled out. Obviously, Bam Adebayo is still missing plenty of time, and I believe he's out 4 to 6 weeks. It kind of was announced today. For Houston, Jalen Green continuing to miss quite some time, but then you also have Daniel House and Kevin Porter ruled out tonight already. Austin Rivers out for Denver, Bones Heinlein and Ball both doubtful. On the other side, Josh Hart is questionable. Hassan Whiteside questionable for Utah. On the other side for Minnesota, which is going to be a big game that we need to keep an eye on throughout the entire day, Jalen Noel, Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and Patrick Beverley all questionable. For Dallas, Sterling Brown and Willie Cauley-Stein, both questionable. On the other side, John Morant, Brandon Clark, Zaire Williams, all out. And then you have Kyle Anderson as doubtful at the time. Etuan Moore, Michael Carter-Williams, both out. Harrison Barnes and Mo Harkless questionable for Sacramento. Damian Lillard will continue to miss time. Obviously, CJ McCollum is out for quite a bit as well. But then all questionable, you have Nasir Little, Anthony Simons, Ben McLemore, and Cody Zeller, and then Andre Iguodala questionable for Golden State. Jaylen Brown was ruled out last night, but he is questionable to play tonight. I would assume, just based on their wording, that they don't want to play him unless he's ready for the massive minutes. Or I guess they don't want to play him massive minutes until he's healthy enough to do so. So I would assume with him being ruled out last night, if he does play, he probably doesn't get over 30 minutes. So if he's ruled in, kind of just hurts guys, versus if he's ruled out, we have guys that really get bumped up. And then on the other side, Nicholas Batum is up to questionable at this point. That is essentially all of it. That was a few minutes of injury news, quite a bit going on. We can get into the position by position breakdown. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing me talk at this point. So at point guard, Spike, why don't you start us off?
All right. Yeah, I mean, it's a really big slate, so it's going to be hard to outline everyone I like, but I guess I'll start off with some Tyrese Halliburton sitting at 6K, gets a matchup against Magic. And their defense is just nothing to be afraid of at all. I actually really like this game in general, considering the Magic just somehow, some way keep on keeping these games close. So I mean, Halliburton at 6,000 is a nice play for me. You go a little bit more down. Dennis Smith Jr. for Portland is at 5,800. His price is getting up there, but I mean, pretty much have no McCollum. Simons is, I think, questionable, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really expect him to play. Still a really viable option right there. Cade Cunningham, I think, is 7,600, and he had a ceiling game. His last game out, I forget who it was against, but he was nearly not owned at all. So I expect him on a bigger slate, he shouldn't get a lot of ownership either. So that's someone else I'm targeting. And even though he burned me severely last game, Cole Anthony is someone I like on the other side of that game. You can actually use him with Halliburton. With the terrible game he had, I don't think anyone goes back to him. So could see him at really low ownership. And he might have only put up 9 fantasy points, but he's also put up 60 fantasy points at points in time. So really volatile and a good player to take a chance on. And then if you want to go a little lower, the Bulls are still going to be without Kobe White, and Caruso is doubtful. I don't see him playing. So I hope I don't butcher this name too much. Ayo Dosunmu didn't really see much of a price up increase. He's sitting at 3,900, and if he has anything like the game he had two nights ago, he's going to easily smash that value right there.
Yes, I mean, anyone that has played college basketball DFS, Ayo Dosunmu is just an outstanding option. I believe he was then a first-round pick for the Bulls. It's only a matter of time before he's going to have a major role in that offense, in my opinion. With so many guys out, it makes sense that it is now. I actually played him against Denver. I swapped out last minute. I had James Bouknight in, and then when Bouknight wasn't starting, I swapped out to Dosunmu. He is a really good option. He's really versatile. He's flashed kind of early in his career, and I feel like he's not taking over the offense the way that he kind of can. So I do believe that there's actually more upside, and he's coming off of a 31.5 fantasy point game. At 3,900, you don't even need close to that. So he's probably the top option. I agree with a lot of players that you said. I think that there's a lot of really good point guards tonight. The one that kind of stuck out is Cade Cunningham. He's turned the corner, essentially. I do think that at his current price tag, he's strictly a tournament option. I don't think you really want him in cash games, but especially in a matchup against a team like the Washington Wizards, I'm not worried about it. It's a really good matchup for his style of play, just having the triple-double potential. I think he took like almost 25 shot attempts in his last game or something. So Cade Cunningham is starting to look like the player that most anticipated after, more or less a very short adjustment period, because he's still very young, obviously. But I do think he's a really good option. At the top, I believe that Steph Curry is fine. My big concern is obviously a blowout if they basically have none of their stars in this game. Luka Doncic, I'm also completely cool with. I don't have any issues with either one of them, but you probably drop down and just not necessarily save money because you can play guys like De'Aaron Fox. You can play like Cade Cunningham, who are all expensive, but you don't need to go to the very top of point guard, I don't think. You also have Kyle Lowry, who is going to take on a larger offensive role with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo both out. So I do think at 7,200, Kyle Lowry makes a really good option. If Jaylen Brown is ruled out, Dennis Schroeder is a really good play. If Brown's in, I like the pivot to Desmond Bane. He's actually been playing really well for Memphis. He's had the ball in his hands a decent amount, really flashed offensively, which is kind of strange that you wouldn't think that he really would be able to create his own shot all that well, but he does possess the ability to do it. And then you already talked about him, but you kind of just really need to look at Dennis Smith Jr. 37 and 39 minutes in his last two. We already know that he can contribute fantasy points at a really high level. Dennis Smith Jr. is probably, I don't want to say my favorite play because there's guys like Dosunmu who are just, grossly underpriced. But Dennis Smith Jr. is one of the top plays, I believe, on this slate. Moving to shooting guard, I don't necessarily know. I feel like this isn't really the position that I want to go all the way up to the top either. I don't like paying 10-5 for Zach LaVine. I know DeRozan's out, but even so, this feels like you're paying for his ceiling because there are still other guys in that offense that are going to, whether you believe they command the ball or not, they're going to play with the ball in their hands. Vucevic, obviously Lonzo Ball plays with the ball in his hands a lot, and LaVine is still the focal point. But I don't necessarily think that you want to get all the way up there. What are you looking at for shooting guard, though?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I don't plan on going at that top at all. Probably one of my favorite plays in the entire slate, and I guess this kind of depends on Karl Anthony Towns being in, is Donovan Mitchell at 8,700. I think that's way too cheap for him. This is a really good matchup. I expect this game to kind of go back and forth if Towns is in, so just keep your eye on that. But at 8,700, and he could flash a good 60 fantasy points if his shot is falling. Other than that, you can go down a little bit. I think Kelly Oubre's price tag is catching up with him a little bit here. It's 7,500. That's a little steep for me, but I mean, I'm pretty sure he dropped 50 fantasy points. So I mean, if you want to take that shot, I'm fine with that there too. Gary Trent Jr. is sitting at 6,200, gets a good matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who just don't have a good defense at all. I'm curious to see if they'd put Lou Dort on him. I don't think so, but if his shot has fallen too, that's a lot of upside right there. He's a little bit more scoring dependent, but again, if that shot's falling, I'm all about that. And right a little bit above that with the Bam and Jimmy Butler news, Tyler Hero is a great option at 7K. Can easily smash that tag. It's a pretty good matchup as well. And then if you want to go down way further, you could interest me in some Terrence Davis at 3,800. He's kind of had ceiling games his last couple of games. So, I mean, eventually he's got to come back down to earth. But, I mean, he's just been playing lights out, and his price just hasn't moved much at all. So he could easily, put up another 30 fantasy points, and that's more than what you need at that price tag.
Yeah, Davis, the weird thing is, like, he's played roughly 30 minutes in each of his last two, which has obviously allowed him to go off 37 and 38 fantasy points. The big thing is prior to that, he played 15 and 17, and he still scored 22 and 21 fantasy points. So, like, even if for some reason they don't play him, and obviously I think this is slightly contingent on Harrison Barnes because they're going smaller with Barnes out. I also think that it kind of is contingent on Mo Harkless because they do enjoy playing Harkless for some reason. But I mean, even with that, like if Terrence Davis gets 25 minutes, he should smash that price tag. And you essentially can just put Dosunmu and Davis in at point guard, shooting guard, and you have a ridiculous amount of money. And we haven't even gotten to any other positions. So I think that's a really good call. I think Donovan Mitchell is a really good call as well. He's one of my top options. If you want to run some type of stack with Cade Cunningham and just kind of bring it back and hope that two keep going off against each other, I do believe that Bradley Beal is very interesting. I don't think, Detroit really has anyone that's going to slow him down. Kelly Oubre was another guy that I was looking at. I mean, the price tag is up there, but the upside is 100% fine. They just don't have anyone that's going to create their own offense more than he will, I guess, is the best way to put it, because obviously you do have a few guys that can. Miles Bridges is not really going to create his own offense, but like Gordon Hayward does have the ability to. So just not as well as someone like Kelly Oubre, in my opinion. So I do really like Oubre. You kind of talked about a lot of the guys, and I don't just want to keep going over guys that you brought up. So I'll try to chime in with some other options that I do believe are fun. Lou Dort, he should be locked into major minutes for Oklahoma City. He's played really well, especially when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's in, and he doesn't necessarily have to really create for himself. If you're not familiar with Lou Dort's style of play, very defensive-minded, but he's taken on a significantly larger offensive role. And the big thing is that he's taken, I believe it's like 99.5% of his shots are either behind the three-point line or in the paint. So just ultra efficient shot selection. And it's one of the reasons why he does come with so much upside. And at only 5,300, it still is, more or less entirely too cheap. And then at 5K, you have Cody Martin, not really coming off that big of a game, only 26.5 fantasy points, but he played 42 minutes. He should be locked into minutes in the high 30s, most likely. A ton of people played him in his last game. I'm expecting fewer to play him tonight because his price tag jumped, I believe, 1,100. I think he was 3,900 the other night, if I remember correctly. So I do think that that's a really good option. And then I just kind of feel like I need to outline Shake Milton if Tyrese Maxey is out. Obviously, Shake Milton grabs the start again. He played 35 minutes in his last game, 27.5 fantasy points. He still gets another matchup against Charlotte, who they played in their last game. So Shake Milton will make a really good option as well. And then one guy that I like and think is a little bit too cheap is DeAnthony Melton. 4,500, even when he doesn't play big minutes, he has the ability to score fantasy points in a hurry. So I do think that he's a relatively solid option, but just with the type of slate this is, he's more or less a tournament play for me. At small forward, I do believe that you have a few guys that you can spend up for, and I don't really have any issues with any of them. So who are you looking at small forward, and do you think you get above 10,000 for anyone here?
I mean, I have no issues with any of the guys that are priced over 10,000. You got Levine, Tatum, Paul George, Durant, and Luka. I think all those are viable options and really good options at that. I don't know if I'm going to go that high. At the moment, I'm not going to. I personally like people like you got Norman Powell sitting there at 4,800. There's not going to be any CJ McCollum again, and Powell is a little dependent on his shot. His peripherals aren't that good, but if that shot is falling, I mean that offense has to come from somewhere. It can't all come from Dennis Smith. I really like him there. If you go up a little bit, you got Franz Wagner again, 5,800. The last couple of games I've been fading him, thinking his price is too high, and just every game he just continues to just put up these ridiculous numbers. His playing time is just constantly in the 30 to 35 minutes, and I'm sold. I'm sold on him. Getting up there in price again, Jayshawn Tate's at 6,900. But there's not going to be any Kevin Porter Jr. I think he could have a really good game against the Nets. They're really not great guarding the power forward, and most of their attention will probably go towards Wood down there. So that's someone else I'm interested in. And then another dart, and I know Sriracha will like this, is Max Strus. I don't really like Duncan Robinson at home. His shot just doesn't seem to fall there. So I think as long as Struce's shot is falling at 3,800, he could easily smash that tag. But that's generally where I'm looking at. And one more I'll add real quick is Derek Jones Jr. at 4,300. I mean, just like Ayo Dosunmu, I mean, he's stepping up for a big role with DeMar DeRozan out, Patrick Williams out, so you could definitely interest me in him for some value right there too.
Yeah, I think you outlined this really well. There are a lot of plays that we mentioned at shooting guard. There's a bunch that you mentioned there as well that I agree with. There are only a few that I really want to talk about here, though. So I know we already talked about Franz Wagner, but man, that price tag is so bad. Just put him at 7,000 and then let people make a decision on him, right?
Yep.
There's just no reason to leave him under 6,000 at this point, especially because he actually hit 6K in his last game and showed no sign of needing the price tag to drop at all. And now he's back down to 58, especially in a matchup against Sacramento. So Franz Wagner is probably, more or less a top option for me. Derek Jones Jr., I agree. The price tag's just too cheap for him playing bigger minutes. And then if you want to move off of Wagner there, Dylan Brooks, 21 shot attempts in his last game. He has been taking just a ton of shots, even in the limited minutes that he's been playing. So when you finally get him into the big minutes, and now he's played 30 plus in 3 of his last 4, he played 36 in his last game. And obviously Memphis continues to deal with a ton of injuries. You kind of have a spot where Dylan Brooks can really take over the offense and become one of the top shot makers. So I do think that he comes with the upside to destroy the price tag of 6,100. I mean, he shot 38% in his last game and he scored 41 fantasy points. So easily comes with the upside to beat that. He's also like 21 minutes against Sacramento. He scored 35 fantasy points, just stuff like that, where Dylan Brooks is going to be a big part of that offense. And it's just a matter of how aggressive he gets. And I feel like in a matchup against Dallas, where he pretty much can just attack the rim if he wants to, he could get pretty aggressive if they're going to give him big minutes in this game. But that's more or less what I wanted to outline at small forward, just because of the guys that we talked about at shooting guard, who you mentioned as small forward as well. So we can move on to power forward and discuss a few guys here. There's a decent amount to like here. I feel like just some very solid options, but who are you looking at?
So I have no issues up top with Giannis and Durant. I think those are both really great options. You can throw Tatum in there too. Tobias Harris is getting another great matchup again. He was questionable the game before, which kind of took me off him, even though he ended up playing and having a pretty good game. Charlotte just cannot defend this position at all. We've seen it all year long. And I think Embiid had the game last game, so I think this is Harris's time to have a good game. And on the opposite side of that, you can look at PJ Washington again, 6,800. I think that's maybe a little overpriced, but I mean, just with how many injuries they have and COVID and all that, he's going to be forced into big minutes. With those minutes comes fantasy points. So I mean, I'm really liking him too. At the same price tag, and I know it feels like I keep going back to this game, and I am, is just Wendell Carter Jr. also at 6,800. The Kings just don't have a good defense. Like neither one of those teams have a good defense. So I mean, he's in a really good position. Rashawn Holmes doesn't scare me that much. Down there, so that's definitely someone I'm looking at for sure. If you want to go way down there, I'm pretty sure Brandon Clark, as you said, was ruled out already. Xavier Tillman at 3,400 is a really good play. He should see at least 20 minutes. I mean, and if for some odd reason this game blows out for whatever reason, he'll get even more time. So that's kind of where I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, I think you outlined a lot of really, really good options. I don't necessarily know how many I would really add to this. I think one thing to mention is that Chicago is really bad against forwards, which adds Evan Mobley to my GPP pool, and Lauri Markkanen I actually think is way too cheap at 5,700. So Lauri Markkanen is probably the option that I prefer over Mobley, but both come with plenty of upside. So I do really like both of them in this game. I just slightly prefer Markkanen for the smaller price tag. That's probably all that I would really add. There's not a ton to like as you save salary. I do think that Xavier Tillman's an interesting option. I completely agree with that. You kind of outlined a bunch of guys that I do like at power forward. I think you can add someone like Gordon Hayward just because he's obviously going to play a big role in the offense. If you look at his last game against Philly, he scored 36 fantasy points, which is nothing to write home about, but he only shot 26%. It was 5 of 19 from the field. So imagine if his shot is falling, the upside is obviously very clear. He had 9 assists in that game. So more of a facilitator, I guess, in that type of way. Outside of that, Jaren Jackson Jr., you can't trust his minutes because sometimes they just don't give them to him. I think they're safer with Brandon Clark out, but he still isn't necessarily locked into minutes in the high 30s. And even if you believe that he is, he can foul at literally any given point. Or I guess get in foul trouble. Anyone can foul at any point, but he can really get in foul trouble fast. So I don't necessarily trust Jaren Jackson Jr., but we know that Dallas is really bad against bigs. He comes with a ton of upside, and his price tag is down to 7,000. It was recently as high as 7,600 in his last matchup against Dallas. Obviously, he didn't do overly well in that game, but I don't really care that much just because the matchup is so good. So I will consider Jaren Jackson Jr. just more of a tournament option. At center, there are so many good options. You obviously have Giannis, but we're at the point where Giannis is the third most expensive play. You have Joel Embiid, who I used in the last game against Charlotte. He dropped 75. Same matchup, the same team. They don't have anyone to stop him. Nikola Jokic is up to almost 12,000. He's just been arguably the most consistent top option of anyone realistically in fantasy this season. You also have Karl Anthony Towns at 10.8. I mean, he hasn't necessarily been the epitome of consistency throughout the year, but he has flashed plenty of upside. And then even as you drop down more, you have Julius Randle, Domantas Sabonis, who I don't necessarily love either of them, but then you get down to guys like Christian Wood. He's still 9,800. Nikola Vucevic, who's obviously playing a bigger role with no DeMar DeRozan. He's 9,500. A lot of really good high-priced guys at center. But overall, who are you looking at? And do you think this is a position that you spend up on tonight?
I mean, yeah. So you've heard me at each position say I'm not touching the top, and this is why, because there's just a lot to like up here, and it's pretty expensive. But you touched on Joker. I think that's a great play right there against the Pelicans. He's gonna keep Jonas Valanciunas' hands full down there, and then right underneath him is Joel Embiid, and again, they're terrible against bigs. Karl Anthony Towns, if he's in, I mean, I'm absolutely playing him. I personally think that's going to be a really good matchup to watch against Gobert, but I think Towns wins that the majority of the time. If you go down a little bit on top of that, this guy I can never seem to get right, but he has a good matchup once again, and it's Miles Turner. Going against the Knicks, they rank 30th in guarding the center. They do have a great defense overall, but in tournaments, this is a tournament play. I'd be willing to take a shot on him again and see if I can finally get him right. You go down a little more. You were talking about Jaren Jackson. I personally like Steven Adams a little more, and at that price tag at 4,900. As long as he can get the minutes, just like Jackson, his minutes just aren't safe at all. If he can get 25 minutes, I really like that price right there, and I think he can easily smash it. Someone else that was a little cheaper than that, Precious Achiuwa, I think is a really good play against the Thunder, who really aren't that good at guarding bigs either. Not like he's a big center at all, but I think this is a matchup he can excel on.
Yep. I mean, you outlined that really well. There aren't that many other options realistically at center, but we're kind of in this weird spot where I'll list all guys that I'm at least willing to take a shot on. And when you start at 6,300, it's just basically the entire list where Rashawn Holmes, Mo Bamba, Miles Turner, you already talked about. I will personally, at the moment, skip over Robert Williams. But I do understand that the upside is there. But then you have Isaiah Stewart, you have LaMarcus Aldridge. Even if you want to go down to Jared Vanderbilt, who's been playing bigger minutes, I mean, they are all viable options. None necessarily my favorite. I think of the group, I would play Miles Turner. That would be my top guy. But I think that there's plenty of guys at the top. If you want my top high priced, I probably go back to Joel Embiid. I think number 2 would probably be Christian Wood. And then as you're dropping down more and you get to the bottom, I believe that the top option for me down below would be Steven Adams. But I do 100% agree that Precious Achiuwa was way too cheap at the price, especially for the matchup against Oklahoma City. So a lot of centers that you can go with. I mean, this slate is just jam-packed with a ridiculous amount of viable options, not only for cash realistically, but the tournament pool is always generally big because you can essentially go wherever you want. There are some plays that obviously are better than others. But when they start gaining ownership, you have the low owned guys and everything. But for this slate, it feels like there's a ton of cash options as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different ways you can go in cash and in tournaments as well. So, really shouldn't see a lot of chalk. I mean, it's a 13 game slate. Everyone should be relatively low owned, if you will. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I think obviously there's going to be some chalky options that do get up there, but I think that they're going to be lower owned than they should. Like there's some slates where like someone like Desuma would be 80-90% owned. That probably isn't the case on a 13 game slate, even in cash. So I agree with that. But that's all we have for you guys tonight. Again, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We will answer any questions that you have that you drop in the comments below, or any comments. We can respond to those as well. Good luck tonight. Hopefully all the screens are green, and we will be back for tomorrow's 3 game slate.